whatever they had in terms of on their camels, they found that their goods were returned to them. وَجَدُوا بِضَاعَتْهُمْ رُدَّتْ إِلَيْهِمْ. Their goods, whatever trade that they had, was returned to them. And so they said to their father, يَا أَبَانَ مَا نَبْغِي. What else would we want? Right? هذه بضاعتنا ردت إلينا. This is our, luggage or baggage or our goods has been returned to us. وَنَمِيرُ أَهْلَنَا وَنَحْفَظُ أَخَانَا. And so we will provide for our family. Namir, which means measure, right? Bring merchandise for our family. وَنَحْفَظُ أَخَانَا. And protect our brother. وَنَزْدَادُ كَيْلَ بَعِيرٍ. And in addition to that, we have an additional camel load. Because remember, Yusuf alayhi salam would give people by individuals. So each individual with a camel, he would get something, right? Everything's good, Sheikh? طيب. And then they said this is ذَلِكَ كَيْلٌ يَسِيرٌ. This is an easy measurement or load or trade or whatever the case is. Now, of course, if you look at this verse, they didn't expect, obviously, that they had no idea that their belongings were returned to them. And so you can only imagine, perhaps, or trying to think about their feelings once they opened this. Most likely a feeling of excitement, right? They were excited that it was brought, they found their belongings or their goods, it was returned to them. And so this is something that is extra. So it's almost that they had gained merchandise for free, right? And so they realized, most likely, perhaps they might have realized this was not an accident, or it could have been an accident. But nonetheless, what it did was that it gave them an opportunity to argue forcefully for taking their brother with them, right? So the dynamics of the argument kind of changed a little bit. And so if you look at their argument, it's a very persuasive argument. Once again, this is in addition to the first argument. This is another form of argument. You're looking at it, and included several points. That just one verse included several points. And so they said, قَالُوا يَا أَبَانَ مَا نَبْغِي. Right? What else would we want? Right? And so it's interesting, look at our merchandise, and has been returned to us in addition to what we have gotten. What else more would we want? And so this is an easy bargain from a person who's very generous, like a generous minister. So this person that we went to is very generous. What else would we want? Let's do this. Or it could also mean, what more would we want other than to protect our brother so we can get more grain? That's or depending on the other conversation, right? When he said, هل أمنكم عليه كما أمنتكم على أخيه من قبل? Should I entrust you with him similar to how I entrust you with your brother? And so this perhaps is a response. What else would we want? Of course, we'd want to protect him because we want additional grain and measurement. Otherwise, we won't be able to get. So that was the first point of argument. And then what did they say? وَنَمِيرُ أَهْلَنَا, which means that we will provide for our family, meaning that they will trade again with that merchandise. So it's like a bonus. And then they said, وَنَحْفَظُ أَخَانَا. And so there's no reason for us not to protect him. We need him, right? We need him to have that measurement, that trade. Without him, we can't do it. So that's the third argument. And then, وَنَمِيرُ أَهْلَنَا وَنَحْفَظُ أَخَانَا وَنَزْدَادُ كَيْلَ بَعِيرٍ, right? And additionally, we'll have more rations of food because you have an extra camel with you. That's an extra person. ذَلِكَ كَيْلٌ يَسِيرٌ. This is something that is easy. There's no hardship, no harm is expected, right? Nothing. And really, this was, once again, an excellent sales pitch. They're trying to convince, this is an argument, they're trying to convince their father. If you notice, this time, in the beginning, right, they said, أَرْسِلْهُ مَعَنَا, right? أَرْسِلْ أَخَانَا مَعَنَا. They said, send our brother with us. But this time, did they ask for the brother to come with them? So the previous verse, when they first came, they said, send our brother with us. In this verse, after they found the merchandise, did they ask their father to send Binyamin with them? No, they didn't, right? It's almost as if that's it. They didn't ask for the brother again. They merely just insinuated that it's expected that he would be coming. Essentially, when you're trying to sell somebody something, right? First, you want to tell them, hey, buy this, as opposed to say how much you're going to pay, right? The first one is you're giving them a choice of to buy it or not. The second one, you're only giving them a choice of how much to pay, meaning you're buying this, right? How much are you going to pay? It's a different, different mentality, different frame, different psychology. And essentially, this seems what they had applied, right? They assumed, khalas, that we're like, no, this is not even a discussion. He's coming with us. We're just putting you at ease, right? These are the talking points. Look, it's simple. He's trusted, very generous. Why not? Let's do this, and so forth. And so, if there's one thing we can learn from this verse, really is that persuasion is an art. Persuasion is it's an art, and it's a very important tool to have to navigate life. Sometimes, right? To navigate life. However, we should only use it for Allah's pleasure, because remember, it's a tool, right? Tools can be used for good or for evil. Right? A person can, even the Prophet ﷺ, had mentioned this in a hadith. He said, some of you, alhanu bihujjatihi, right? Alhanu bihujjatihi, he said, you come and you dispute, and I rule for you or against you, and some of you might be more eloquent in their presentation than the other. So don't take something that is haram, because that eloquence can convince a judge, and the other one might be right, but he's just unable to argue, right? And so the judge basically will just base it on whatever he sees in terms of that, and it's wrong. And so essentially, the art of persuasion can be used in something that is good or something that is bad. And so we have to make sure that we gain that tool, but similar to how everything else we do in life, we have to be watchful and conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and do it with the intention of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Yes, Shaykh. In the context of? Yes. We talked about two tools already, right? We already talked about two tools. Last week, it's that giving that sense of urgency, pressure, right? And then the second one is persuasion. You need this. So as long as they don't lie, as long as they don't cheat, as long as they provide false information, then that's fine. Right? So for example, I can highlight the quality of my merchandise. I can highlight it compared to somebody else. That's not lying. Right? I can start mentioning the negative things about the other merchandise. I'm trying to convince them why mine is better. That is fine. Right? You're just stating facts essentially, as long as you're not lying. Now, if somebody asks and says, well, is there anything I have to be concerned about in terms of this merchandise? And if you say no, and there is, then you have just lied. You have to be careful, right? So using those tools in persuasion and convincing is fine, because you're not forcing the other person. You have to remember, there's a difference between trying to convince them and force them, right? Pressuring and forcing, two different things. Even though sometimes that line is kind of crossed a little bit sometimes. But it's fine to use it in business. Wallah. Yes. Once again, pressuring and making them have a sense of urgency is different than, holding a sword and saying, say la ilaha illallah, right? Or I'm going to hold you captive and imprison you until you say la ilaha illallah. I know, but it's a fine line. Remember, they're not holding them captive. They're not holding a gun to their head. They're not doing some of those things. It's a fine line. Some will agree, some will disagree. Right? It's not the method of the Prophet ﷺ to do that. He grabbed Umar al-Khattab and he said, isn't it time for you to say La ilaha illallah? Right? He grabbed him, but he didn't say La ilaha illallah now, whatever the case is. He didn't do that, but he would, and then, when he had, I forgot, subhanAllah, the name of the companion, he had tied him to a pole to the masjid, but he was a prisoner, right? Abu Lubaba, Jazakumullah khair, right? Abu Lubaba. He tied him to the pole, and he was a prisoner. He was not and then he would pass by him, and he will talk to him, right? And then at the end, he just let him go. He didn't force him to say La ilaha illallah or anything like that. But once again, trying to convince and pressure, make them feel a sense of urgency, is different than that methodology a little bit, right? And once again, I can't say it's not permissible, but I'm not personally just my choice. I'm not very comfortable with that. Yeah. Because for me, it can be, well, at least the way I view it, it's a double-edged sword. This person might be happy, right, and feels that this is the best thing that happened, or later on he might go and the shaitan is like you got pressured into this. What kind of people are those that try to pressure you to do things? Don't you think you were hasty? And so it can be a double-edged sword. Wallah. I personally don't like it. I personally prefer the prophetic method. Wallah. So, khair inshallah. طيب. Now, once they pitched that to their father Yaqub alayhi salam, their father Yaqub did not exactly say, okay, take him, but he said something else where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mentioned. He said, قَالَ لَنْ أُرْسِلَهُ مَعَكُمْ حَتَّى تُؤْتُونِ مَوْثِقًا مِّنَ اللَّهِ لَتَأْتُنَّنِي بِهِ إِلَّا أَن يُحَاطَ بِكُمْ فَلَمَّا آتَوْهُ مَوْثِقَهُمْ قَالَ اللَّهُ عَلَى مَا نَقُولُ وَكِيلٌ. So he said, I'm not going to send him. Yaqub alayhi salam, he said, I'm not going to send him with you. قَالَ لَنْ أُرْسِلَهُ مَعَكُمْ until حَتَّى تُؤْتُونِ مَوْثِقًا مِّنَ اللَّهِ, until or unless you تؤتوني موثقا, which means like I guess a pledge or a covenant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or before Allah that you will bring him back unless إِلَّا أَن يُحَاطَ بِكُمْ, unless you become kind of surrounded, imprisoned, trapped. إِلَّا أَن يُحَاطَ بِكُمْ, right? Something would prevent you. And so then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says فَلَمَّا آتَوْهُ مَوْثِقَهُم, and so when they gave Yaqub alayhi salam their pledge, he said قَالَ اللَّهُ عَلَى مَا نَقُولُ وَكِيلٌ. He said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a witness upon what we're saying. And so, first of all, over here, if you notice, Yaqub alayhi salam was convinced to send Binyamin, right? He was convinced, and so he sent Binyamin with a condition. So the question is, what is it that made Yaqub alayhi salam be convinced to send his son Binyamin? Right? One thing it could be because he understood the consequences of not sending Binyamin with them, and that consequence is that they'll no longer be able to get food, grain. Because remember, the area they were in Hashem, in Palestine, because of the drought, there was no crops, nothing, and it's been several years. The only place or the only country right now that has resources is Egypt. And so they would travel, trade, come back. And so not sending Binyamin means that they will suffer hunger. And so perhaps it's because he understood the consequences. But also maybe perhaps part of what convinced him is it was that generosity of Yusuf alayhi salam, right? The generosity of Yusuf alayhi salam and the treatment that he gave to the children of Yaqub alayhi salam. It had influenced and persuaded Yaqub to realize that this is something that is safe. Like, I don't have to worry about it, right? That this is, if I do send Binyamin, he will most likely come back to me, because otherwise there's no trade, nothing happen, and they'll be hosted, they'll be safe. Allah Alam might be a combination of both, right? But nonetheless, even though when he was convinced, you can tell that there's a bit of still anxiousness, that he did not want just to send him with them. And this is why he placed a condition, right? He was still unsure about can he trust them with the security and safety of Binyamin, completely 100%. And so to reassure himself, he made them do what? He took a precaution. And that precaution is, he made them to pledge, to take an oath by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they'll do everything they can to bring Binyamin back again. Right? That is the precaution he took. And then he said, unless. Right? Unless you are completely surrounded, you've been kind of imprisoned, or something happened where you're truly incapable of bringing him back. Like something might happen. He might die on the way. Allah alam, we never know the aqdar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, meaning that there's something that has, when he said unless something like prevents you, meaning there's something that has to happen to all of them essentially, right? Something's going to happen that is that is preventing them from doing everything in their power to bring Binyamin back, to assure his safety, to provide for him during that trip and so forth. And this is really the only acceptable excuse for not bringing him back, right? So he said, unless you are incapable, you've been surrounded, whatever the case is. And so Yaqub's children, they did take the oath. And from here we can tell that Yaqub, what he's essentially doing also at the same time, perhaps he's giving, or he has to, essentially in this case, what he's doing is he's giving his children a second chance to gain his trust. Second chance to gain his trust. Because otherwise he's not going to send Binyamin with them. Right? And so this perhaps like a second chance. But at the same time, he gave them a valid excuse if they fail. Right? With that exit, he said, unless you're surrounded. This is kind of like, it was set up in a way that, gave him a way out, a valid excuse if they're unable. Right? And he outlined what the valid excuse is. Type. And so from this verse, there's actually several lessons we can learn. Right? Wallahu alam. One thing that is very interesting over here is we have to bear in mind the emotions that Yaqub alayhi salam had as a father. Like any father who has lost a child, and if that child, he feels the reason that he was lost was because of the action of another child, right? You'd be very hesitant to trust any of your other children with that child, usually. So these are emotions, but one lesson we can learn from here is that sometimes we have to overcome our emotions for a good logical decision. Like we need to overcome that emotion, not let it become a barrier for that decision, right? It's okay to guarantee, to take guarantees to make us feel a bit better and safer, like what Yaqub did. He made them take an oath, right? It made him a better ease, but he still had to overcome that emotional aspect, right, for a very logical decision. And so we see Yaqub alayhi salam over here, he exercised that additional protocol to ensure that Binyamin would be returned back to him. And I guess for them, there was no, or at least in that state, there was no better protocol than to have them swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, that they'll do their best. Now one can argue how, they could just swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? They could just swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why did Yaqub alayhi salam feel that this was enough of a guarantee? Why was that? It's interesting, right? To show them that he trusts them still, but he's sending Binyamin with them. I think that's enough of a sign. In fact, if I tell a person, say, Wallah, you're going to return this to me, that already shows that I don't trust them, that I need them to swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they're going to return it. But at the same time, I will only trust your oath if I know that you will uphold it, that you honor that oath, that you honor the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? That's the only way this is going to work. So what this tells you is that he did trust his children with that oath. Right? So you have to remember that the brothers of Yusuf, the children of Yaqub, right, despite what happened, they were still individuals that were raised in a very righteous household, a place that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is honored. That's something, this is like one of the greatest things and the most important things in their life, right? And so Yaqub alayhi salam knew this from them, obviously. And so if they take an oath with the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Yaqub knows that they would not, violate that because it's a form of blasphemy, right? You're undermining the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this case. And so this is one thing we can learn from this, right? From this kind of message that like we should always honor the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And not take it lightly. And I'm saying this for a reason, is because quite often we find, at least in my culture, I know that for sure, right? But I've heard here and there, any person that wants to reassure what they're saying, no matter how insignificant, they'll say wallahi, right? Or they want to invite a guest, wallahi, you're going to enter. Wallahi, you're going to eat. Wallahi, you're going to drink, right? Wallahi, I'm saying the truth. The name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that should be honored and not placed in significant things like this, right? Because also the more we use it, the more likely we are going to violate and cross those boundaries. You have to be very careful with this, right? And so this is one lesson we can learn over here, is that we should honor the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But also, once again, despite, I was mentioning this because you have to realize, despite what has done, what the brothers of Yusuf did, is that they are individuals still that have some sort of integrity, right? Especially when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, one thing we can also learn over here is when Yaqub alayhi salam gave them that exception, right? You swear by Allah, you're going to bring him unless something else. This tells us that not being able to fulfill our oath or abide by it because of something that is out of our control is something that is excusable, right? Of course, provided that it's a valid excuse in Sharia itself, right? So something that is out of our hand and it's a valid excuse in Sharia does not negate the oath that we took, right? This is why, once again, it's also beneficial that if you're going to take an oath, to also say inshallah, right? Say along with it inshallah, because if it doesn't happen, then you didn't really break your oath. It's an exit. Wallahu a'lam. The other thing we can learn, if you notice over here also, Yaqub alayhi salam, what he really did was he helped set up his children to succeed, not to fail, right? And so let me explain how this happened. But one we can learn is we should set people up for success, not failure. And so we do this by not giving them, or by refraining from giving them unreasonable standards, right? Or unreasonable expectations. Instead, when we ask for something, we can always give them a way out, right? Through clauses, through conditions, things that would kind of help them succeed as opposed to fail. We don't want to trap them, right? We don't want to, set them up for failure. So you get this from when Yaqub alayhi salam said, "Illa an yuhata bikum," unless you get trapped or surrounded. That's their way out. So he's giving them a chance to succeed in their oath, to succeed in their mission. And so if something fails, did you fail because of shortcoming or something that was out of your control? If it's something out of your control, then you're excused, right? If it's something within your control, then you're still accountable, you're still responsible. Wallahu a'lam. The last thing I'm going to mention about this is that whenever we can, we should always try to give others a second chance, right? To gain our trust if they have betrayed it. But at the same time, it's okay to take proper means and measures to help ensure it, right? Because remember, trust needs to be gained again. You still kind of I'm going to give you a second chance. I still don't trust you 100%. I'm going to give it a chance, and here are the precautions that I'm going to take so I don't get betrayed again, right? And that is fine. Hold on. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, before he sent them off, Yaqub alayhi salam said, وَقَالَ يَا بَنِيَّ لَا تَدْخُلُوا مِنْ بَابٍ وَاحِدٍ وَادْخُلُوا مِنْ أَبْوَابٍ مُتَفَرِّقَةٍ وَمَا أُغْنِي عَنْكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ إِنِ الْحُكْمُ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ عَلَيْهِ تَوَكَّلْتُ وَعَلَيْهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُتَوَكِّلُونَ. And so Yaqub said to them, O my sons, يَا بَنِيَّ لَا تَدْخُلُوا مِنْ بَابٍ وَاحِدٍ. Don't enter from one gate, which means don't enter the city or don't enter the palace from one gate, but rather what you do is enter from different gates. And then he said, وَمَا أُغْنِي عَنْكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. I cannot avail, right, protect, protect you from anything, like you know, um, protect you from anything that is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he said, إِنَ الْحُكْمُ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ, that the ruling or decision is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. عَلَيْهِ تَوَكَّلْتُ عَلَيْهِ فَيَتَوَكَّلُ الْمُتَوَكِّلُونَ. Upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala I rely, and upon Him subhanahu wa ta'ala let the reliant rely, right? Let those of tawakkul have tawakkul. And so what this tells us is that once the brothers of the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam swore to protect Binyamin, their father gave them another instruction. Right? Another set of instructions is that they should not enter the gates of Egypt or the gates of the palace itself from one gate. That's an interesting order. Why is that? Hide the identity. Pretty much, right? And so, because if you can imagine, so even though Yusuf alayhi salam was given half of the beauty, right? His brothers seem to be equally also handsome, but they're also, mashallah, very well built, strong. And so now there's 11 of them, just like one family, 11 full-grown, strong, handsome men walking into a place or a town all at once. This will definitely kind of turn heads, definitely one way or another, right? And it can, and so Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam essentially feared the evil eye would afflict them, right? So essentially he asked them to pretty much lay low, right? Don't attract attention. Lay low, spread out, so that you won't attract any attention due to your physical qualities and large numbers. And what's interesting is this is very contrary or opposite to what we have become, in the habit of doing. Right? So he said, don't attract attention, lay low, so people don't look at you. But nowadays, is that what we do? No, right? That's not what we do. What do we do? Yeah, we we show off not just one thing, ya Sheikh. Right? It sometimes is very easy to look or identify somebody's life because they posted it all on some sort of a social media platform. Everything about our life, their life, right? I had the best steak. My mother brought me this gift. My wife bought me this. My children, this. My boss, my job, my car, my watch, my clothing, my trip, my accomplishments, my success. All right, now let's present this publicly to everyone, right? This is completely the opposite, right? This has an aspect of showing off, of boasting the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a show off, right? There's a difference between فَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. Over here, some of the scholars of tafsir is saying the bounty over here, the bounty of Islam, religion, Quran, inform. That's the best bounty, right? That's the best ni'mah, that we're Muslims, we have the Quran, and so forth. Others interpret it by saying it's okay to show the blessings of Allah upon you, but that's different than showing off. Let it show on you, right? So if Allah blessed you, for example, with money and wealth, don't show off, but it should show on you. You shouldn't be disheveled. You shouldn't be wearing torn clothes or anything like that, right? It shows, but you're not showing off, right? But once again, what we're doing is we often display our life. But what's interesting is also that we display the good things in a form of perfected images. It has to be like the perfect clip, right? We take 10 pictures and from them we select the best one, right? My what is it? My photogenic side. I learned that. Apparently there's a photogenic side. There's a name for it. I forgot what's it called. My good side. I don't know. But anyway, there's that's what's being presented. And unfortunately, even sometimes some people, what they do when they're posting some of this stuff And sometimes they even stretch the truth a little bit to gain praises, to gain the likes, the hearts, the follows, or even sometimes paint a false image, right, to the social media followers. And that is extremely problematic, right? That's the opposite. Right? Even the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ista'inu ala qada'i hawaijikum bil kitman." Right? Ista'inu, which means take as a form of assist, a means to accomplish your needs, like whatever you need to accomplish. What the means you're going to use is kitman, secrecy. Right? Now, I'm not saying treat everything like a secret of war, like a battle secret that nobody should know about or anything like that. But no, it just means don't keep saying, I'm going to apply for this. I'm going to do this. Here, look, I'm going to propose to this. No, just go about. If somebody asks, you can probably tell them, right? It's fine. But it's different than announcing. This over here is talking about not announcing. It's not to the point that you're hiding, that your entire life becomes a secret. No, we have family, we have friends. Some of them, yes, we might understand that might be not good things towards us. We want to hide it and so forth, right? That is different. But generally speaking, once again, I'm just pointing out what Yaqub did compared to what we do nowadays. Now that being said, we did say that it is to avoid the evil eye, right? But the question is I'm saying this because sometimes it gets confused. The question is, what is the evil eye, right? And is it different than hasad? Right? Hasad is envy. What is the evil eye, and is it different than hasad? What is the evil eye, first of all? In Arabic, it's called al-ayn. Ayn, right? Ayn is the one that sees. So what is that what is that referring to? That is hasad. I know, but an integral part. No, okay. So there's a difference between jealousy, a permissible form of jealousy, and the hasad. Hasad is desiring that this blessing to be removed from that person, whether you also want it or not. Whether you want it or not. Sometimes you want it for yourself and nobody else. You want it gone from them. But other times it might not even be for yourself. That is even the worst kind. Right? So hasad can be in different levels too. So there's the hasad. The worst of level is you don't even want it for yourself. You just don't want the other person to even have anything at all. Right? And you desire to be gone. That is hasad. Right? And hasad can exist whether you see that person or not. Ayn only exists when you, or happens when you see the thing. Right? No, you don't want to necessarily destroy it. It could be, yes, but not necessarily. So it usually starts when you see something that you admire or like. When it's something that you admire or you like, then there's this metaphysical energy or power that is negative that affects it, right? And it usually happens by repeated looking, and it usually happens because a person does not also invoke the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? They don't say Bismillah, mashallah, Allahumma barik, stuff like that, right? Now, the reason I'm saying this is because let me get back to it again. I'm gonna mention the hasad, right? Hasad, as we mentioned, is usually a form of resentment. It's accompanied by something. There's resentment, like hatred, right? That you don't want this person to have this. You want it to go on way. Now Ibn Qayyim, right, mentions something. So what I want to point out is hasad and the evil eye can be independent, but they can also be combined. Hasad is a bit more general than the evil eye. Right? Hasad is more general than the evil eye. So hasad, or the evil eye, can be accompanied by hasad, but it also can not be accompanied by it. Because it is general, because hasad is more general, right? Hasad is just larger, right, than the evil eye. When you seek refuge from hasad, then by default also you're seeking refuge from the evil eye. That's why some people confuse them, right? So Imam al-Qayyim rahimahullah, when he says, when like this is a situation when you talk about the evil eye, right, coincides with the hasad, he said everyone who puts the evil eye on another is envious, right? Envious means like not necessarily the bad one, like mashallah they like this, right? But not every envier puts the evil eye on another. So this is when they talk combined, but this is where it's larger. And he said the word hasad is more general in meaning than the word ayn, which is the evil eye. So seeking refuge with Allah from the one who envies includes seeking refuge with Him from the one who puts the evil eye on another. The evil eye is like an arrow which comes from the soul of the one who is looking or seeing, right? Could perhaps it include envies. And the one who puts the evil eye on another towards the one who is envied and on whom the evil eye is put. Sometimes it hits him and sometimes it misses. So the evil eye doesn't necessarily happen all the time, right? Even if somebody has or possesses it, sometimes it afflicts the person, sometimes it doesn't. If the target is exposed and unprotected, it might afflict him. But if the target is cautious and armed, how are they armed? With adhkar. That's why it's very important that we adhere to the remembrance of the morning and the evening. It's important that we adhere to performing the 5 daily prayers on time, right? Because they are in the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The arrow will have no effect and may even come back on the one who launched it, right? So this is Ibn al-Qayyim. He mentioned that in Zad al-Ma'ad. So, but one thing I want to point out is that one can actually put the evil eye on another person by simply just admiring something, right? And without remembering the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? They're just admiring something, and it could happen. And so this is why the evil eye can actually also come from a righteous person. Like the person doesn't intend evil to that person at all, right? It's more like, wow, look at that, right? I'm admiring it. And so there's that metaphysical aspect that it affects it. But also this is how we understand why even an individual sometimes can give ayn to himself or his children or his wealth, right? Say, oh, look at my children, right? I'm so proud of them, without saying, MashaAllah, Allah barak, right? Look at this car that I have, right? Without saying, MashaAllah barak. Look at my strength, I'm in my 80s and I still run marathons, right? Without saying Allah, MashaAllah barak. A person can afflict himself with the ayn, right? Without realizing. And so the best thing to do is to always, whether you're talking about yourself, your children, or somebody else, to say, MashaAllah, Allahumma barak, right? And this is in Surah Al-Kahf also, right? لولا إذ دخلت جنتك وقلت ما شاء الله لا قوة إلا بالله. Right? You enter your Jannah, your gardens, you say, ما شاء الله, what Allah wills, لا قوة إلا بالله, there is no strength except from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And so what I want to point out is that hasad and ayn can be different, but they also could combine. Hasad is more general than the ayn. Now, that being said, we have to face the reality that sometimes we over-exaggerate the ayn. It seems like we're so easy to blame everything on ayn, right? Oh, I saw that like a person looking at me this way, right? Or when we mentioned this, they looked at this way, or they said this. No, not everything is attributed. It does exist. It is there, but we should not it should not be a hanger that we hang every problem in our life on that. That's not true, right? That's not how it is. It does exist, yes. And even the Prophet ﷺ told us, if we know the specific person has the ayn upon us, how we could deal with it. There's a specific form of ghusl that they perform, and then or wudu in the water with specific things, part of their bodies, and the waist of their band, they wash it in there, and then we make wudu with it, right? We pour our ghusl, we make ghusl with that water. But once again, this acknowledges that it does exist, but once again, we should not blame every negative thing in our life or everything that we're unable to get or every hardship based on ayn. Because otherwise, might as well just stay at home in your basement, right? Don't go out, so nobody would see you, right? But that's not how it is. And remember, protect yourself with adhkar, with tawakkul ala Allah, right? Wallahu a'lam. طيب. Now after Yaqub alayhi salam advised his children and ordered them to enter from different gates, Yaqub alayhi salam reminded them that he cannot protect them from the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. مَا أُغْنِي عَنْكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ مِن شَيْءٍ. I cannot protect you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with anything. Like, I'm telling you to do this, but remember, I can't protect you from the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is in control. And upon Him I depend. And everybody else should also depend. And so, we have to remind ourselves, this is very important, is Yaqub alayhi salam did something that every parent should try to instill into the children. Right? And that is to teach them to attach their hearts to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to completely depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That it's I'm not the one protecting you, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is protecting you. I'm a means for your protection. Right? But real protection is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm the means for your rizq, but the person it's Allah that is actually providing it. Right? I'm just a means. And so installing that in our children is something that is important, that He is the only protector. And so they need to turn to Him in difficulty, Allah alam. The other thing is He also taught them that true tawakkul means that you also plan and take appropriate means. He said, depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but enter from different gates. Or enter from different gates and depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You take the means. You're not being reckless. Wallahu alam. Tayyib, what can we learn from this? I need a break, so you guys gotta share with me what you learned. Nothing, right? You guys are just waiting for food? Alright, what did we learn? That is correct, right? Correct. So tawakkul means that we plan well and do the best to implement the plan, but leave the results to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You depend on Allah to allow those means to succeed. Excellent. Jazakumullah khair. What else? That's one from the sisters. 1-0. Brothers are not doing well today. Ya ikhwa. I know you know something. Come on. Does it count if I tell you the answer that's from the brothers? Yes, it counts. Because I'm a brother. Tayyib. One lesson obviously is that we can take precautions to prevent envy, right? Or to try to protect ourselves from envy and the evil eye by laying low, right? By not advertising, by not showing off, by not sharing our blessings publicly with everyone, right? We can share it with our those who we trust, our nearest, our family members, and stuff like that. That is fine, right? The other thing is we need to remember, it's a good lesson from here, is to remember that we are weak, that we can't protect ourselves or others without the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And it's very important to remember this because it removes a sense of arrogance that sometimes we have. Right? That no matter what happens in the end, we have to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has angels that protect us. It means that no matter what we do, we need that protection. So Allah provided that means, and so we have to depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that. And once again, as just to combine it with that tawakkul, right? As we're doing this to protect ourselves from the evil eye, we're depending on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're entrusting Him to also protect us from those things. طيب. The last thing I'm going to mention is that we should trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decision and decree and accept it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we had taken the proper means to do something and it didn't work, that's a decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We accept it. Right? Because remember, when He said, take different gates, and I can't protect you, which means that this means can succeed or it can't. If it doesn't succeed, it means that Allah did not want it to succeed. That this is a decree, a fate, a qadar that was meant to afflict you. And so we have to accept the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and understand that probably this is from the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's mercy in it. We haven't seen it yet or understood it yet, but we just have to trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu a'lam. طيب. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَمَّا دَخَلُوا مِنْ حَيْثُ أَمَرَهُمْ أَبُوهُمْ مَا كَانَ يُغْنِي عَنْهُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ إِلَّا حَاجَةً فِي نَفْسِ يَعْقُوبَ قَضَاهَا وَإِنَّهُ لَذُو عِلْمٍ وَإِنَّهُ لَذُو عِلْمٍ لِمَا عَلَّمْنَاهُ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the meaning of the translation of this verse, or the meaning of the tafsir of this verse, is that when they had entered, وَلَمَّا دَخَلُوا مِنْ حَيْثُ أَمَرَهُمْ أَبُوهُم, when they entered from where their father had ordered them, right, or instructed them, مَا كَانَ يُغْنِي عَنْهُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ, it did not avail them or protect them from anything against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? إِلَّا حَاجَةً فِي نَفْسِ يَعْقُوبَ قَضَاهَا, except it was just a need in the nafs, in the soul, in the nafs of Yaqub, that he carried out. وَإِنَّهُ لَذُو عِلْمٍ لِمَّا عَلَمْنَا, and then Yaqub is upon knowledge of what we have, or from which we had taught him, which from Allah had taught him. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, but verily most people do not know. And so in the first part of this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points out that وَلَمَّا دَخَلُوا مِنْ حَيْثُ أَمَرَهُمْ أَبُوهُم, is that when they entered, right, it shines the light in the fact that the sons had obeyed the father. Like they entered from where he ordered them. Now, it's interesting is that he's not there. Is he there to see them? No, they're a different country, right? And they still obeyed their father, even though he wasn't present. This highlights or shines a light on some of the aspects or personality of the brothers of Yaqub. The children of Yaqub, the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam. And I'm pointing this out because when we look at the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, sometimes when we say that story, we depict the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam as pure evil people. But the reality is contrary to that. Like we see certain situations over here, they actually went out to bring things for their family. They honored the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They listened to their father even though he's not there. So these are not exactly 100% evil people. There is some evil in them. There's the envy, the fact that they crossed the boundaries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and essentially almost did something that could result in the death of somebody else. They lied to their father. There's a negative aspect, but there's also a positive aspect. And so the reality is that there is some good in them, right? Whether we like it or not, this is the nature of things. And similarly, most people, right, any human being has a component of good and evil in them. Every human being. What matters is, what are the proportions? Is it mostly good or mostly evil? Right? No person, right, with the exception of prophets, of course, no human being is void of any good or any evil. Even Fir'aun, right? Like we highlight that he is from the shaitan of the human beings. There's still some good in them, whether we like it or not. He's the one that allowed Yusuf to live in his palace. Musa alayhi salam to live in his palace, to be nurtured in his palace, to be raised in his palace, even though he hated Bani Israel. But that is good. Yes, he might have been persuaded by his wife, but this tells you how much he loves his wife. So there is positive aspects, even in Fir'aun. Now, there's also negative aspects in every human being. Right? In every human being. And so we should all this tells us that we should never lose hope in ourselves in correcting what is negative. If we have things that are negative, never lose to correct it, or never lose hope that we can improve and become righteous individuals, and never lose hope in others that can be righteous. But also at the same time, don't put others on a pedestal. This is something that we fall into nowadays. We have to understand that people are human beings and they can fall into sin. They can make mistakes. When we hang our religiosity upon individuals, right, and we see this happen, right, upon individuals, the minute they fall, we start having doubt in our religion. right? Many people, unfortunately, celebrity sheikhs, right, for example, and we have to be honest with ourselves. Sometimes we treat them in a way that is beyond how we should be treating them, right? We glorify everything about them. That is not good, because if we do that and we put them there and then we discover that something wrong happened, that they made a mistake, they're human beings, what happens? Right? We start having doubts. Is this what Islam is? Right? It shouldn't be like that. Or what we do is we erase everything good that they did. They're human beings, right? It is our fault that we raise them to a level that shouldn't be raised. We have to understand they make mistakes. If they made a mistake, it doesn't mean we erase all the good in them that cannot be trusted. No, there's khair in them. And so we should act upon that balance. Wallahu a'lam. طيب. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informs us that, after that, that verse, He informs us that even though they obeyed, their father, and they entered from separate doors, it did not change the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? It didn't. Meaning, even though that, everybody did their part, everybody played their role, they did everything, they executed everything as they should, to realize, it was not effective, right? There was no effectiveness to it. And the reason behind it is, as human beings, we have no control over our fate. We have no control over our destiny. And this is important because we tend to hear this in movies, in cartoons. I have control over my fate. I control my fate. No, you don't. Right? If we controlled our fate, we would become the most healthy, richest people in the world. No, but nothing bad would happen. Right? No, we don't control the fate. We don't control our destiny. Right? That is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informed that Yaqub alayhi salam had ordered his sons to enter from these gates because there was something, a need in him that he carried out. What is that need? So there was a need in Yaqub that he wanted to fulfill. What is that need? Safety. Safety of who? Excellent. So he wanted to protect his sons. So he felt the need to protect his sons from, let's say, the evil eyes, right? And so he wanted to ensure their safety. He wanted to ensure their safety even after the pain that they had caused him. Right? Even though, usually as human beings, when somebody hurts us, we don't care about them. Sometimes we wish negative things about them. But over here, even though his children have caused him immense pain, caused him immense pain, he did not sever that relationship with them. Right? He did not desire bad things from them, nor did he withhold his affection from them. He still wanted good for them. He wanted to protect them. Right? And this is how Yaqub was, alayhi salam. And the last verse, the last part of the verse, it describes Yaqub alayhi salam by saying that he's a person of knowledge. They have knowledge of what we have taught him, but most people do not know, meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Yaqub knowledge, and Yaqub acted upon that knowledge, right, in the best way he could, and that it's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is a blessing that many people do not have, right? So what can we learn from this, right? One thing we can learn is that obeying our parents is not limited to us being young or supported by them. Remember, these were fully grown men that were in a different part. Their father ordered something, they still fulfilled his orders. Right? And this is part of birr, being dutiful to our parents. And so even as adults, even as adults, we should obey our parents, provided that it does not conflict with our other duties, right? That it does not cause us to neglect our duties. So for example, if we're married and we have children, and we have to provide our children with money, with food, with shelter, and so forth. And let's say if one of the parents says, I need to start a business, give me all your money. Right? No, that's going to harm my family that I'm responsible for. I love you, I don't have to listen to you. This will result in me neglecting my other obligations. Right? That's not what happens. Right? It's not supposed to be that way. Right? Wallahu alam, right? Um, the Sharia requires us to respect the wishes of our parents, um, and our fathers and our grandparents, um, but it does not tell us to violate the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And to violate the obligations that Allah has placed upon us. Wallahu alam. The other thing we can learn is that, once again, no one is pure evil, right? No one is pure evil, but there's always, some good and virtuous things about us, about everyone, and so we should refrain from categorizing people as good or bad, right? Like completely, just erase them, categorize them as good or bad. We can say this person is righteous, right? Saying righteous is something that is good. Doesn't mean that they're angels. We can say this person is not righteous or heedless, but we're not saying that they are 100% shaitan, right? There's no good in them. And we see this from the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam. Right? The other thing is that we can learn is that the actions that we take to protect ourselves from something has no efficacy in itself. Like, this action has no power in itself. So when I drink water, this water in itself doesn't have power to quench my thirst. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that creates that quenching of thirst because of this means. Right? Is that understood? And so whatever I'm sorry, I got a signal from the back to let's go eat. Not from him. It wasn't from him, actually. It was from the NPR. Somebody was waving at me. He's like, food, let's go. طيب. I forgot what was I saying. Actions, things that we take, protective measures, right? Yeah. See, we were talking about, Shaykh, the means, the means don't have power in their own. Like, food is not gonna quench our hunger, fill our hunger. It's just a means. Allah will allow that to happen, right? So, alhamdulillah. طيب. I'm going to mention two more things, inshallah, right? One is that we should never be fooled by the notion that we are masters of our own fate. Remember, this is something that atheists propagate. People that want to propagate that you are in control. No, we're not in control, right? We're not. Allah is in control, right? Wallahu alam. The other thing, and last thing I'm going to mention, which I feel like sometimes is important, is that family relations are not an all or nothing experience. Right? It's nothing. It's like, when you go into this, it's either all or nothing. That's not how it works. It's not like, we're either in good terms or we're not. No, every family, there's a mixture between both, right? We can be hurt by some family members and continue to care for their well-being. Right? This is how it works. We ourselves can hurt other people, right? Even unintentionally. It doesn't have to be intentionally, it could be unintentionally. And so, if we want them to give us other chance and treat us in civility and respect, we should also pay that back again, right? And there's immense reward for those who are remain connected to their family members, even though if they harm them. Right? Remember the Prophet ﷺ, one of the companions complained to him. He said, I connect with them and they sever me. I'm good to them and they are, very bad to me. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, if they are like what you say, it's as if you are feeding them the ashes of the hellfire. So the point is not to sever that connection, even those people could be bad to you. You fulfill the duties Allah placed on you. Connect with them, they could change. Wallahu alam. Well, I was hoping to take one more verse, but I think we're going to have to stop here, right? Before I get scolded and yelled at. Jazakumullah khair. Subhanakallah bihamdik. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Please help yourself.